Good evening. This is our news bulletin for tonight. The SPREP meeting comes to an end with the minister's high-level dialogue. Schools are concerned about truancy, that is an ongoing issue affecting students' academic achievement. Finding commercial space in town proves challenging for interested businesses. Meanwhile, the industrial park is being used for storage space. The Working Men's Club display of agriculture is an initiative to encourage more local farmers to grow different varieties of crop. A new business has opened at Hill. The 27th SPREP meeting of officials and ministers came to a conclusion today after 3 days of robust discussions for officials and a half-day session for high-level dialogue for ministers. The SPREP annual report for 2015 was launched during this meeting that outlined the activities and projects implemented with members and partners in 2015. The report also featured outcomes from the different divisions and highlighted the Pacific voyage to COP21 and the achievements and projects implemented in partnership with development partners, donors and members. Environment ministers from a number of islands arrived on Tuesday, and a separate program was arranged for them to see more of the development projects on island that address the various environmental issues. This included tree planting yesterday at the Aliluki site that was devastated by Cyclone Heta.
I think it was a fantastic idea to actually spend some time visiting Niue. I've been to Niue a few times, but again, it still amazed me to actually go around Niue. And as you said, we end up planting a few coconuts, and if there's some Tongans out there, make sure you come around and check out that coconut I planted and make sure that it's watered properly. But on seriousness, I think we had a great day in checking out some of the initiatives that you have on the ground and actually getting to see Niue as it is, because otherwise we'll be stuck here in the meetings and won't have time to actually see what a beautiful country that you have here.
The high-level segment today had 3 main agenda items: Sustainable Development Goals, Climate Change and Oceans. The Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by world leaders in September of last year that set the agenda to end poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and tackle climate change by 2030. Ministers discussed some of the challenges of implementation of SDGs for the Pacific and how to contextualize global issues into regional and national context for a resilient Pacific.
The discussion was more or less how we can actually form partnership, how we can help each other out. All the 17 goals are relevant to all of us in the Pacific, especially when it deals with environment, health, education, disaster management. All of them, I believe, are priorities to the Pacific countries. And actually sitting around with my fellow ministers and high-level representatives actually gave us a chance to have that discussion and see how we can share our experience and our expertise between Pacific Island countries and see how we can engage partners to actually help us with whatever is missing, whether it's capacity building and so forth. So I think that's a key thing, to actually be around the same, in the same forum, to share, to learn from each other.
Sustainable development goals they have put in place for each country, And it's very interesting because we're more or less saying the same thing, like to work together and the Pacific Islands, and to analyze situations, from each country. But it's no different from other Pacific Islands to another. It's no difference. And therefore, for me, the whole idea is for SPREP, to coordinate projects and all that, of all islands, Pacific Islands. And also, I think the main thing here is to move things for us, forward.
Climate change is one of the most pressing regional issues, and SDG 13 looks at the need to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts, the challenges and opportunities for the Pacific post-COP21 and implementation of the Paris Agreement.
One of the tasks that we're actually trying to do with climate change is actually when you're trying to mitigate the problem with climate change and reducing emissions, there are 2 major strategies. One is actually reducing emissions through, say, renewable energy generation in your power sector. The other is more about trying to actually revive your oceans so you can take on more carbon. So when you're talking about oceans and you're talking about the environment, it actually, in fact, have a positive impact on your climate change. Because, the more you look after your oceans and your environment, the better it is in terms of actually absorbing more of the carbon dioxide. So it is interrelated in a sense. And for example, some of our what we call a national determined contribution as part of our commitment to the Paris Agreement is actually doubling our special management areas, the part of the ocean that we actually want to manage. So by doing that, even though it's more of a climate change initiative, it actually helps help the oceans at the same time and the environment.
Pacific Islands depend on the ocean for sustenance, and the conservation and sustainable use of ocean, seas and marine resources is paramount to their livelihoods and survival.
During the Paris, COP21 meeting, our Prime Minister committed ourselves fully to the marine park as a marine park. This is quite a challenging, statement, because prior to that, only half of that area is committed to a marine park, which is our Maraemo. But now it has, covered the total, area. And, but of course, this has been brought about with consultations with our, traditional leaders, and they push the issue through, which government, have just to acknowledge and endorse, the needs by the traditional leaders.
The meeting concluded with the endorsement of the SPREP activities and budget for the next year. Niue's Reach to Reef project was also officially launched in Tuapa this evening before the farewell function for delegates who will be departing tomorrow and Tuesday next week. We will bring you more on that story next week. Truancy is becoming an ongoing concern for the education sector, with some children regularly absent from school without good reason. The Education Department is mandated by law to make provisions for the education of people of Niue. Schools continue to monitor students' academic progress, and students were constantly absent. According to the Education Act of 1989, it is an offence for a parent who allows their child to miss attendance at school without good reason, and on conviction, they are liable to pay fines. This is not a new problem at Niue High School, and notices have been sent out informing parents and caregivers to encourage children to go to school. Niue High School Principal Mr. Charles Ioane has sent out emails reminding parents, caregivers and students and the community about the amount of time students are away from school. With exams coming up, there is a concern that students' absence could affect their preparations, especially those at the NCEA levels. Complacency about this problem is concerning because it is also an underlying problem affecting academic performance of students. Mr. Ioane said that there is only so much that they can do to accommodate the academic needs of students, but it is really up to them, the parents and caregivers, to make a commitment, especially at NCEA levels. He said the community as a whole needs to help address the truancy issue. The school is looking at alternative ways of addressing this problem, with the hope that the community is supportive of dealing with this serious issue. A shortage of available commercial space has presented additional challenges for businesses wanting to set up in town. The Industrial Park Factory Shell at Funakula was established with assistance from New Zealand and placed under the management of the Niue Chamber of Commerce. Apparently, it was not specifically built for a purpose, but they're now used to best address what is now becoming a major problem, that is the lack of commercial space. Initially, this was set up as a business hub for commercial activities. However, there have been a number of reasons this place is not ideal and is unsuitable for some operations. There are 23 spaces available and all are occupied at the moment. There are also 2 government departments that have taken up 2 units for storage purposes. As the landlord for these properties, the Niue Chamber of Commerce has encountered problems with late rental payments, ongoing maintenance costs, and roads leading to and from the area need to be fixed but are on private land. Chamber has presented a concept paper to government for the development of another area for commercial space, but that is also dependent on funding and government priorities. The Working Men's Club showcased and displayed their agricultural products last week in a half-day program that was open to the public. This is now becoming a regular event for the group that consists of some close friends who enjoy working out on the plantation.
It started 4 years ago from our drinking club.
there was a core group of us, who decided to have amongst ourselves mini show of some agricultural crops, mainly yams, China taro, and kumbra, or sweet potato.
The idea is to encourage more local farmers to continue growing a wide variety of crops and try to generate some interest with the younger generations. Group spokesman Bill Mutvo said the concept has attracted and built some very close friendships where they help each other out from time to time.
Some of us gather and help some to grow kumbas and that, but not all. It's more like an individual thing. It's a challenge to members to get, rather than just drinking, but involved in planting.
The group will be having an annual display with the plan to sell their products locally or to offshore markets if an opportunity arises. There is a new cafe in Tuapa that just opened for business, offering another option for people to eat out in a beautiful and iconic setting. Hio Cafe is a new business at the entrance of the famous Hio Sea Track. A soft opening for the cafe was held after the Tuapa Show Day a few weeks ago, and the owner says that after the opening, the response has been quite positive. For the family and the owners of this cafe, it has been a fulfillment of a lifetime dream to return home and give back to the community.
It's always been a decision with Tony and I to come home. And my parents owned a restaurant and bar years ago, so yeah, it sort of made sense to come home and do something, and we're blessed with this piece of land, and I'm just the occupier of the family at the moment on it, so yeah, been really blessed, and it's always been a plan to discover the world and then come home and give back.
Some of the challenges that have been faced throughout the developments has been the time factor and also availability of resources. However, the positive side has been the amount of family and community support throughout. Construction started at the beginning of this year and has taken a little over 6 months to complete. For Victoria and Tony, knowing the environment they're operating in has had its benefits, and rather than competing with others, they're looking to complement what is available and find a point of difference.
Knowing what the other cafes do, I don't want to go and produce the same thing. So I've come here thinking how I can produce something that's different with Niue Blend. And that's really important, to blend our own stuff in it. Yes, we bring things from abroad, but also we've got our own vegetables now, thank God for hydroponics and that. And for the local people, their produce, that's something that we're going to expand on. Hio Cafe wants to eventually produce Niuean flavours and play with Niuean food and present well what we put out to the people.
Hio Cafe will be open 7 days a week from morning until afternoon and throughout the weekend. They have plans to expand the business, adding a garden bar, kayak service, as well as adding more space for customers along the landscape heading down towards the sea track. And that concludes our news bulletin for this evening. We do hope that you can join us again next week. Don't forget the Alofi North Show Day at Niue High School grounds this coming Saturday.